Hello and welcome to today's online Keynote webcast for the latest Kendo UI release. We're really excited to have you with us here today, and we've got some great things to show you. Before we get started, of course, whenever we get this many people together on a live event, it's always possible for technical glitches to occur. So use that Q&A manager. If you have any trouble, we'll do our best to help you out. But of course, today's event is completely recorded. It's going to be posted to our YouTube event as soon as our YouTube channel, as soon as it's done. So watch for that and enjoy. We've got a lot of great raffle prizes today, everything from brand new MacBook Pro with a Retina screen, Surface 2, the new iPad minis, phones, Amazon gift cards, and of course Kendo UI licenses. We hope you win. Just by being here today, you are eligible, and we will talk about how you'll find out if you win at the end of today. But best of luck to all of you here joining us for this live keynote in the raffle. If I've never had the chance to meet you before, if you've never attended another online keynote, my name is Todd Englund, and I'm EVP for cross-platform tools and services here at Telerik, and I will be your host for today, but I've got a lot of other great presenters joining us to show some amazing demos of what's new in Kendo UI's latest release, and we'll be welcoming them to the stage here very soon. But before we do that, just a few announcements, sort of recap where we are in the year so far. This is, of course, the third of three major releases for Kendo UI in 2013. And in the first two releases of the year, we've really focused on continuing to deliver on our original mantra for Kendo UI, to give you everything you need to build sites and mobile apps with HTML and JavaScript. And if you look across what we've delivered so far this year in the first two releases, it's a pretty amazing collection of improvements. Everything from server wrappers for PHP and for Java JSP, to Windows Phone 8 support, new data visualizations, new renderings, all kinds of improvements across the entire framework that you've loved, and that's just in the first two releases. Now, of course, delivering all that improvement takes a lot of hard work, and I think it's worth taking just a second to acknowledge all of the investment that the amazing Kendo UI engineers have done in 2013 so far to make this possible. In fact, to date in 2013, there have already been over 7,500 commits to the Kendo UI Git repository, which makes it one of the most active repositories on all of GitHub, at least as far as I could find. For comparison, in the same time frame, even popular projects like AngularJS, which we love, only have about 750 commits. So very active. We're doing tons of work every day to deliver new value to you in Kendo UI. And 28 different committers so far this year, all the hard engineering work that goes into making what we're showing you today possible. Now, before we look at the demos, a few things I want to call your attention to. If you've never had a chance to check out the Kendo UI Mobile App Challenge, I'd encourage you to do so. Some of that hard engineering work that went into our last release was all about squeezing out every last bit of performance from hybrid mobile apps or HTML5 web apps in Kendo UI Mobile. And we took those improvements to a developer event to talk to you developers and see if our hybrid mobile technology could pass that native sniff test. We caught it all on camera. It was a lot of fun. I think you'll love the video if you check it out. Go to kendoui.com/app-challenge. And if you want to take the challenge for yourself, the app is out there and available for you at cuteness.io, totally accessible via browser. Try it out on your devices, of course. The most modern, newest devices always run these things better, but check it out. We think you'll be impressed with the results. We'd love to hear your feedback. Two other brief announcements before I hand it off. We'd like to keep you up to date on what's happening in Icenium as well, because this product from Telerik is definitely what you want to be using if you are building a hybrid mobile app. And since we last talked, Icenium has shipped full integration with Visual Studio, now supporting Visual Studio 2010, 2012, and 2013. So you can leverage all the amazing power that Icenium has to offer for building cross-platform hybrid mobile applications, and you can do it all from directly inside perhaps your favorite IDE in the form of Visual Studio. We've also now officially shipped Telerik Everlive, our backend service that gives you the easy way of integrating things like push notifications, user management, even the ability to store data and files in the cloud, with tons of great integrations with existing Telerik products like Sitefinity, Icenium, Windows Phone controls, as well as obviously Kendo UI. So if you've never checked out Everlive in the past, now is a great time. It's officially available, easy to integrate into any software development project. We think you're going to love what you see when you try it out. But what I know you're all here to see today is what is new in the latest release of Kendo UI. So I'm going to invite to the stage our next presenter, Brandon Satcham, Kendo UI Program Manager, to tell us what is new in this latest Kendo UI release. So Brandon, the stage is yours.
Thanks, Todd. And good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, everyone. We're happy that you are all able to join us today, and we can't wait to show you what to expect in this latest Kendo UI release. First, let's talk about the web. And it goes without saying that the web is absolutely everywhere these days. Not only is it possible to access the web from almost every corner of the globe, but a growing number of consumer devices are becoming web connected, from cars to refrigerators, vacuum cleaners, televisions, and apparently even teddy bears. Now, as a result, building sites and apps for the web doesn't mean what it used to. Even a few short years ago, building for the web was an exercise in targeting the lowest common denominator browser or monitor resolution. But today's web is different, and responsive design has emerged as a powerful solution to deal with this complexity by enabling developers to build apps with flexible UI that looks tailor-made on all devices where it's run. Our Q3 release is about embracing this trend in Kendo UI. And we've spent a lot of time over the last 4 months building tools and features that make it dead simple for you to rely on Kendo UI in your responsive sites. In Kendo UI Web, we worked top to bottom to make all of our widgets responsive by default, while also improving our support for Bootstrap and making the dimensions of our themes extensible. And we also found the time to add a few new widgets, a button and a progress bar. For Kendo UI Data Viz, we're excited to announce the beta of a brand new mapping control with support for GeoJSON and third-party tiling services. Maps are also responsive and touch capable from the get-go. And we also found the time to add 5 new chart types in this release, which is pretty exciting, adding to what is already a great collection of charts and graphs in Kendo UI Data Viz. And of course, this release is all also about mobility and devices. In September of this year, we shipped full support for iOS 7 in Kendo UI Mobile a full week before the RTM release of Apple's flagship operating system. In addition, we've poured a lot of time and effort into making a few of our more complex widgets, the grid and the scheduler, mobile friendly as well. So rather than just jamming these highly visual widgets into smaller viewports, we're giving you the tools to ensure that these widgets deliver a mobile friendly experience when rendered on devices. Now, we're going to show you a ton of new features today, all under the banner of our Q3 theme, Responsive UI for Modern Apps. In order to do that, we've broken up today's demos into what we see as sort of the 3 pillars of responsive UI for Kendo UI. Now, if you're familiar with responsive web design, you know that the practice of RWD, as it's called, dictates that 3 tenets of responsive apps: flexible layout, media queries, and adaptive images or media. From Kendo UI's perspective as a framework and widget library, we think that we can deliver all 3 of those tenets with some pillars and principles of our own, starting with responsive UI widgets, then moving to adaptive widget rendering for devices, and finally, modern UI extensions. Now, responsive widgets, as the name indicates, are widgets that are container aware and which play well with your existing grid and layout system. And as I've shared already, all Kendo UI widgets are now responsive by default. And advocate extraordinaire TJ Van Tol is going to show you the ins and outs of these new features, while also introducing our new widgets and some data viz charts and graphs. Now, adaptive widget rendering is a feature that's unique to Kendo UI, and I'm really excited for you to see it. It means, in essence, that we adapt the look, feel, and behavior of our more complex grid and scheduler widgets, ensuring that they remain functional while delivering a mobile-tailored experience. And for this demo, the one and only Burke Holland has the pleasure of showing off these new features, in addition to some brand new scheduler features for all users and devices. And I promise that it's going to blow your hair back. Finally, we have modern UI extensions. Historically, Kendo UI themes have given you a lot of variety when it comes to color palettes, but there hasn't been a lot of flexibility when it comes to those cases where you wanted to change things like default text sizes or padding to give your apps a more modern feel, or even to match the default dimensions of a visual library like Bootstrap. We've added that flexibility in Kendo UI, and I'm excited that the Derek Bailey will be showing off these new goodies along with our brand new mapping and spatial visualization features in Kendo UI Data Viz. I hope you're ready for these 3 guys to drop some serious knowledge over the next 45 minutes. First up, TJ Van Tol. Take it away, TJ.
Thanks, Brandon, and good morning, everybody. I want to start by thanking you for joining us, and I'm glad you did because we have some really exciting things to share with you this morning. Now, I'll be discussing 2 parts of our new release, and that's our focus on making all of our widgets responsive, and some of the new widgets that we've added in this release. Now, as we all know, the explosion of mobile devices over the last few years has made it incredibly important to build applications that work on all screen sizes, whether your user is on a phone, a tablet, a laptop, or a high-end desktop monitor. But anyone who's actually done this knows that it's quite a challenge to actually pull off, especially when you're talking about non-trivial apps with complex requirements. So with this release, we've ensured that all of our widgets have these responsive capabilities baked in. And we've also introduced a resizing API that helps you deal with some of the more complex widgets, things like grids, schedulers, and data visualization. And speaking of widgets, we've added some of those as well. Kendo UI Web has 2 new widgets, the progress bar and button widgets, and there's some new types of data visualizations as well. Now, I could show you slides on these features all day, but the best way to show how powerful these features are is to show them in action. So to do so, we built a small web app. We built the backend management system for a restaurant chain. And like any restaurant chain, they have to manage things like location and sales data and employee schedules, things like that. So let's look at the locations first. Now this locations page loads all of the chain's locations into a Kendo UI panel bar. And if I resize my window here, you can see that the panel bar resizes itself nicely as the window resizes. Now, of course, this isn't all that exciting. Panel bars aren't the most complicated thing to make responsive in the world. You just add a simple percentage-based width. So to look at something more interesting, let's dig into one of these locations. And so within each of these, we have a form that we can edit some of the location's data. And you can see we have a Kendo UI date picker, we have a drop-down list, an editor, and then one of Kendo UI Web's new widgets. The update button here is a button widget. And if we resize this form, you can see that all of these controls also resize themselves nicely to the different screen sizes. The editor buttons wrap nicely. The drop-down list here resizes itself nicely to the different screen sizes. And to show this in a different form factor, I'm going to use the OS X app Reflector, which just gives me a nice way of mirroring my iPhone onto the screen here. And if I dig into one of these locations here, you can see that these controls look quite nicely on the iPhone display as well. Even the editor, the buttons there look nicely, and you get what's really a reasonably complex form here. Looks pretty nice on this smaller screen. Now, one problem I do have with this display is, while these controls look great on the phone here, they're awfully big when you get to this desktop resolution. I mean, this, especially the date picker and the drop-down list here, they're pretty huge. So let's look at the code to actually make these things. The only line of configuration that I've actually added to these controls is just this width 100% here in my CSS. So to keep these from being too big on the desktop size screens, I'm going to actually just add a media query here. And if I go back here, now since I constrained that query to only occur when your size is 600 pixels or less, you can see that this page loads with normal size looking for controls for this desktop resolution, date picker, drop-down list, etc. But then as I get down to a more mobile size resolution, I get the more mobile friendly controls. And this isn't a very complex media query or anything, but I show this example to show that you can use the same responsive design techniques that you already know and work alongside Kendo UI's widgets to create the best experience for the user. Now, as I said before, this form is also showing one of Kendo UI's new widgets, the button widget being used here for the update button. And one thing that the button widget does is just provide an easy way to theme buttons the same way that other controls are. So you can see this button looks very similar to the editor and the drop-down list and the date picker. The button widget also gives you a nice way to add any of Kendo UI's icons to buttons as well. So I'm going to go down here to where I have my update button, and I'm going to go ahead and add a new button. We'll make it a cancel button. And I'm going to add an icon through the icon option. And then I'm going to grab a little bit of code that I wrote earlier to actually make this cancel button actually close the appropriate panel. If we go back and take a look at this, you can see that Kendo UI automatically figured out what icon I wanted and put it on this button for me. So now I have an update and cancel button. Those buttons are a little small, so since these buttons are responsive as well, one thing I'm going to do is I'm going to make them a little bit larger. Let's go with like 49%. And if I resize, now I have this update and cancel button, which look pretty nice. Now, the other one of Kendo UI's new widgets, the progress bar widget, we haven't seen yet, but we actually have a pretty decent use case for it here. Notice that when I refresh this page, there's a brief delay between the time the page loads and the time that the locations actually show up. Now, if we go to the code, we can see that that's because when the page loads, we're calling this load data function. And load data is getting the managers and the locations that we're showing on the page from our backend service. And in this case, it's from Telerik's EverLive is where this data is being stored. Now, because it's getting it from a backend service, there's that slight delay that we saw, which isn't the greatest for the user experience. The user is left hanging. What's going on? Is it something they did? Especially if the backend service is having a bad day. Maybe it's taking seconds to load instead of the usual milliseconds. And we can use Kendo UI's progress bar widget to actually help us out here. So I'm going to go up to where the locations get loaded into up here. And I'm going to add a progress bar widget in here. Now, I'm using the declarative form of creating Kendo UI widgets. So by giving this role of progress bar, Kendo.init, when it's called, which I'm invoking it down here in the body, will actually convert this thing into a widget for me automatically. And the other thing I'm going to do is I'm going to go down to this load data function and comment it out so we can actually see the progress bar. When I reload this page, you see the default display of the progress bar widget. Now, this may look a little odd at first, but that's because there's actually two types of progress bars, determinate and indeterminate ones. And what we're looking at here is a determinate progress bar. Now, determinate progress bars are used when you know exactly how far along the user is in a task. So, in this case, the value defaults to 0. Now, one thing I can do is if I get a reference to the widget here, I'm going to use a little Chrome trick to get $0 to get a reference to the currently selected element. And then I'm going to get a reference to the progress bar widget by getting its data. And if I call the value method here, you can see that the progress bar gets updated to the value I pass it. So this is perfect if, say you have a user that's filling out a multi-part form and you want to tell them that they're 20%, 40%, 60% done, etc. The determinate progress bars make a great fit. But here, we don't know. We're calling some back-end service that's returning some data to us, and we don't know if that's going to take a few milliseconds or a few seconds, or if that service is even down and won't even come back. So in this case, the other type of progress bar, indeterminate progress bars, make a whole lot of sense. And indeterminate progress bars are created by just setting the value to false. And that's all there is to it. So let's go back to our code and actually make this change. So we go back to our progress bar, and I'm just going to set the value to false. So I have an indeterminate progress bar. And I'm going to turn the data loading back on so that when I reload, you can see that the progress bar shows up immediately, and then it's instantly replaced with the locations when they come in. Now, while building responsive forms is pretty cool, and I think this is a pretty impressive set of demos, let's look at something that I think is really exciting, and that's Kendo's responsive data visualizations. So if I go back up to my menu, the other option we have under Dashboard here is the Statistics, which has some charts that show off some of the new features in this release of Kendo UI's Data Viz. Now, this first chart here is a funnel chart. And a funnel chart is just a nice way to visually organize a series of values so that you can easily see the highest and lowest values in a series. And it's being used here to show some expense data. Now, if we switch back over to the code, you can see that the code to create the funnel chart here is just a few lines of configuration. And if you've used any of Kendo UI's data visualization libraries before, this should look pretty familiar to you. It's using the same Kendo chart plugin. Now, two options that are unique to funnel charts are this dynamic slope and dynamic height properties. So I'm going to go ahead and turn those on. And when I do that, you see that the data visualization automatically is redrawn so that these heights are proportionate to their values. So the biggest value here on top, the most expensive thing, takes up the most height, and then these other ones are proportionately sized according to their value, which is pretty cool. The chart underneath this is a box plot chart, and a box plot chart is just a chart that makes it really easy to spot any outliers in a series of data. So here we're looking at daily sales figures for this restaurant chain, and we'll notice that, for instance, during the summer months, there's a lot of low outliers for July, August, and September. And this is something that the marketing team or the sales team of this chain might want to dig into, figure out what was going on in these days. And the box plot chart is really for that type of visualization. Underneath that, we have sales figures that are being shown in a line chart. Now, the line chart is not new to Kendo UI. It's something that's been a data visualization for a while now. But what is new is two different ways of drawing these lines. So this line chart shows the more conventional model of each data point is just connected with the shortest possible line to connect each data point. And what we can do, though, now is I'm going to switch back to the code. And here I have my line chart, and there's two new styles. So there's a step chart, which I'll switch to here, which uses horizontal and vertical lines to actually connect the data points. And then there's my favorite, which is a smooth chart, which picks out a fitted curve and figures out how it should plot through each data point, which I totally don't understand the mathematics or the statistics behind, but I think it produces a pretty nice looking chart. And then the last of the new types is air bars. And air bars are just a different option that have been incorporated into Kendo's existing air, bar, and line charts. And they're a way of showing markers that show an error range for something like a margin of error. In this case, we're showing customer satisfaction survey data. So this is probably a margin of error from the low sampling size that's being displayed on these graphs. And this is really nice when you have two different samples or two different sets of data, as we do here, as you can view these for comparison. And if we go into the code here, you can see that we just have an existing line chart here, and I just have this percentage to configure it. So I'm going to switch this down to 5 just to show how the chart will redraw itself here to show the smaller margin of error there. Now, one thing we haven't covered is how in the world do you make these complex visualizations actually responsive? Now, by default, these visualizations automatically are sized to the container that they're created within. So you can see that they match nicely with the screen resolution of my monitor currently. But if I resize my window, you can see that their sizes don't change at all. Now, this is where Kendo's new resizing APIs come in. So if I switch back to my code here, and we go down to the bottom, I'm going to insert handler that I wrote earlier that calls our new resizing API, and it does it in a window.onResize handler. So what this is saying is every time the window resizes, call Kendo resize, which will automatically readapt any widgets that are passed to it. And in this case, I want to resize any charts. So I'm going to save that, head back here and refresh. And you can see that now as I resize my window, these charts automatically adapt themselves to the different screen sizes. And to me, this is really cool. I could do this sort of thing all day. And I'll try to get both these in the same screen. It's really cool looking. Now you may be asking yourself, okay, like this is pretty cool, but do users actually do this? Does anybody actually resize their browser window while they're using out an application? And for the most part, the answer is really no. It's mostly us web developers. But one thing that users do, let's give an example here. Let's say they're looking at one of these charts on their phone. So I'll switch back over here and load these charts again. You can see that they look nice on my phone by default. But some of these charts are a little cramped. Like this box plot chart, it's kind of hard to see some of these points, maybe if I'm trying to pick out individual data points here. So if I switch to landscape here, you can see that because of this resize handler, these charts automatically readapt themselves, which is really nice because now I have a lot more context to actually view these charts in. So I think this is pretty exciting, and I hope that you're as excited as I am, but we're actually just getting started. So to keep the momentum going, I'm going to pass it over to my colleague, Burke Holland, who's going to take it from here. Burke?
Thank you, TJ. You know, I always get to show off the really fun stuff, and today that's the second part of our release, and it's all about the grid and the scheduler. When we looked at what it was going to take to make Kendo UI fully responsive, we had to include the grid and the scheduler. We just wouldn't be delivering a fully responsive Kendo UI if we gave you a really tiny grid or scheduler and then asked you to be a Marine sharpshooter to properly use them. That's not great UI, and we are all about great UI. We needed these widgets to be just as useful and feature-rich on mobile as they are on the desktop without asking you to code for different form factors. And to make this work, we use something that we call adaptive rendering. Adaptive rendering is something that we introduced back when we released Kendo UI Mobile. The idea is that Kendo UI knows an awful lot about the platform that it's running on, and it can use that information to alter itself and its widgets to better suit that device. For Kendo UI Mobile, that's been in the form of changing the mobile UI components to match the operating system layout. We use this same strategy on the grid and the scheduler. Of course, the best way for you to see how this works is for me to just show it to you. All right, we've got our fast food restaurant here, and I've been tasked with making an editable list of employees, and I'm going to use a grid for that. I bet you didn't see that coming. So I've got an empty JavaScript file here, and additionally I have some HTML that includes my script file and just a div I can make into a grid. So let's go ahead and get started. I'm going to open up a function that will execute itself here. Let me make this text a little bit bigger. I can hardly see that. There we go. Perfect. Now inside of this function, I want to start up a little bit of boilerplate code here, a little initialization code. And then I'm going to get a list of the available locations from my database before I actually initialize the grid, since I'm going to need that for foreign key references. Now at this point, we could actually jump over and you can see that we have a grid. It's just a line, not terribly impressive. Let me go ahead and add the data source in here. I've abstracted all of the data logic into a different file because we really want to focus on UI today. The employee's data source is actually an EverLive data source. And you can see if I go ahead and refresh, it's pulling back all of the data from our Telerik EverLive cloud backend as a service. Now, I want to just show you really quickly the data parts of this application so that you can see this mind-blowing EverLive Kendo UI data source. And it's mind-blowing because it's just so darn simple. You set the type, you set the schema, and that's really it. Nothing else is required to enable server-side paging, sorting, grouping, or full CRUD operations. No code from you on the client, no code on your part on the server, and that's made possible with Telerik's EverLive and its integration with Kendo UI. So now that we have this set up, let me go ahead and specify a couple columns here, make things a little prettier, get rid of the ones I don't want. I like my edit columns on the left, I like my delete columns on the right, including the name, the pay rate, the location, which is a foreign key, or drop-down list, and edit mode. This is so we can see how things really look in edit mode. I probably should also add that this grid is editable, and we'll create a toolbar with a create button so that we can actually create items. The grid's looking pretty good right now, and actually I can just go in and click edit, and I can update this record here. We'll give this person a pay raise. There we go, and I can click update, and it saves. And I just refresh so you can see that I'm not a liar. We can change the location, the foreign key here, and all of this is handled by the Kendo UI EverLive data source in the EverLive Cloud backend. Now this works great and looks great, but if I start to resize the browser window down, as TJ was showing us earlier, the grid compensates as best it can by collapsing columns down to smaller sizes, but at some point the delete button is gone, the grid stops resizing itself, and now we could scroll over to the right to get to the rest of the columns, but this is not the best UI. The buttons are stacked on each other. We can do better. We need to make this widget adapt for mobile. Now, just like everything else in Kendo UI, turning on adaptive rendering for the grid is very, very easy. So if you've used Kendo UI before, this is no surprise to you. It's one property setting here. We set mobile to true. And this tells Kendo UI if you detect a mobile device, go ahead and use adaptive rendering. Now, if we look at this on the web, this looks no different. It looks just as it did before. But what we want to do is see how this grid looks on a mobile device when it's in adaptive rendering mode. Now to do that, I'm going to first set a height on the grid so that it doesn't extend past the viewport here. And on the web, that's going to look a little funny, but we'll fix that in a second. You can see I can scroll through this container here. There we go. Now I'm going to go ahead and pull this up on my iPhone 5 here. And I'm actually using AirPlay or AirPlay mirroring, so you can see exactly what's on my device. This is not the simulator. There we go, I got it up. Let me just size this down a little bit and move it over to the right. Perfect. Now, let me pull this drawer down here, and you can see I've already loaded up the grid in the background, and the grid is panable and it's scrollable, but you'll notice the Add New Record button at the top is staying put, and when I scroll down, the column headers stay put. So this panning is made possible by pieces of the Kendo UI mobile framework that we've ported to make this grid adaptive. Now, when I click Edit, we're still getting these stacked buttons. We can improve this edit mode just a bit, and we do that by using the pop-up editing mode on mobile instead of inline editing. So let me just change this to pop-up. Now, of course, on the web, this gives us a modal window, but on mobile, it's going to do something entirely different. I'm also going to fix this sort of goofy sized grid on the web by making it pageable, and we'll set the page size to, say, I don't know, 5 records, say 7 records. And we will go ahead and turn on server paging. And of course, with our great Everlive data source, everything just happens for us. No code required to do any of the paging on the server. Let me refresh here, and now we have a nice pager, and the grid looks a little bit better than it did before when we were just scrolling through it. And there's the pop-up editing mode. Let's take a look at how this looks on the iPhone. Here it is, it's up. And you can see that we have these nice big paging buttons across the bottom. The pager, the footer is adapted for mobile. I can page through the different sets of data. When I click edit, it actually slides to a different screen, and I can do all of my edits here in a dedicated screen, which is really nice. This is how mobile works. This is how we're used to using mobile devices. I can click update, and the main grid slides back in. When I do an add new event, we get the same exact sort of behavior where it looks and behaves more like a mobile app and less like a web app, which is exactly what we want. If I click the delete button, instead of a confirm or prompt, what we get is this sort of action sheet that slides up from the bottom, asking us if we want to delete the record. All of these things are tailored exactly to the mobile device and really give the user the full mobile and familiar experience. Now, we currently have pop-up editing in the mobile device, but we also have it on the web. What if we want pop-up editing on the mobile device so we get the full mobile experience, but on the web, we really like the inline experience better? Well, we can tie right into the same engine that Kendo UI uses to figure out whether or not it's on a mobile device by using the kendo.support.mobileOS Boolean flag. And we just going to use a ternary operator here, and I'm going to check, and if it's true we are on a mobile device, then let's use pop-up editing. If we're not on a mobile device, then we'll go ahead and we'll set it to inline, and that will give us inline editing on the web and that nice mobile experience when the grid is adapted for the mobile device. So there we go. Inline editing on the web. If I jump over to my iPhone here, we still have the nice adapted mobile experience for the grid. Now, most grids are not just pageable, they're also sortable, groupable, filterable, lots of different actions and features in the Kendo UI grid. Let's go ahead and make this grid sortable. We'll make it filterable as well, and we'll also make it groupable. Now, if you've used the grid before, you know how these things behave on the web. There's a very specific UI for these things. Of course, sorting just happens by tapping the column header. The filtering happens when we click the filter icon, and then we get a drop-down list letting us select by that field and then apply the filter, and of course we can clear it back out. Also, the grouping happens when we drag column headers over. This is a really immersive, interactive experience, and we wanted to bring this exact same experience to a mobile device so that we weren't shaving anything off of the grid in terms of features. So let's take a look at how this plays out on mobile. You can see I can scroll over here, and what I can do is I'm just going to go ahead and tap the last name column, and you'll see it sorts. That experience is very familiar, and it's exactly like it is on the web. When you click the filter, it slides in a new view where you can then use a native picker to select what you want to filter by and then apply that filter to the actual data set in the grid. Very, very nice. Additionally, let me go ahead and go back in and clear this filter here. You can do the same sort of drag and drop grouping that you do in the web, just like that, and that's all with touch. That is the adaptive experience for the Kendo UI grid. Now, the same rich set of grid features that you have on the web available to you, fully mobile optimized for your responsive or mobile projects. Then the next big thing we have today is the scheduler. We not only have a responsive and adaptive scheduler, but we've also got some great new features. I've only got 15 minutes. I'm already running out of time, so I'm going to jump to kind of a pseudo-finished demo here. Now, what you'll see is the very familiar scheduler. We've got a drop-down list that lets us select from a list of locations, and we have this new button at the bottom that says Show Business Hours. So we can toggle between the full day and the business hours by clicking on that button. And you can see that I've already got some people scheduled to work in different places inside the restaurant. Now, we also have the ability to change the timing of events simply by dragging them to make them larger. So I can drag this down and make it larger, and everything is saved in the back end, and the scheduler readjusts everything to put the largest events at the front. Now, one of the new features that we've added with this release is the idea of grouping. And I want to show you how that works because it applies some very, very powerful view features to your grid, and it's especially applicable to the data that we're looking at today. So we've got two different kinds of resources. We have employees and sections. We want to group by sections so we can make sure we have somebody scheduled for each section in the restaurant. So I'm going to specify the group, and then I'm going to specify that I want to group it by the section, which you can see there is a resource right there based on the name. So I just need to group by that, and the grid will give us some very neat horizontal grouping. We'll take a look at that here. That's not quite right. Let me fix this bracket. Should be brackets, not braces. Brackets, not braces. There we go. All right, let's refresh. Okay, and oh, it's group, not groups. So let me go ahead and remove that S there. And this should now give us some nice groups. So you can see here that we're now grouped by the section in which somebody might be working, which is a really, really nice way to view our data. I'm going to add a new person here. I'm going to go ahead and let's put, let's say Doria. We'll put Doria in the drive-thru. Go ahead, add a new record. Actually, she's already there. You probably want to put her there more than once. But you can see as I resize these records and I do this editing, all of this is saved in real time back in the EverLive data source, which is really, really nice. Let me go ahead and get this just right. There we go. Perfect. So that's the new grouping feature inside the Kendo UI scheduler. You can also do horizontal grouping, which will put your groups out to the left-hand side, and you can also group by multiple resources, so you can group by more than just one resource. Now the scheduler, just like the grid, as we resize the page, for a while looks okay, but at some point everything stacks on top, things get really small. We can still sort of kind of use this thing, but if I click on one of these things to edit it, even the pop-up window, as you'll see here, yeah, it just extends right off the side of the screen. There's just not enough room. And so we want to turn on adaptive rendering for this scheduler. So I'm going to go ahead and do that here. Just like the grid, we just set mobile to true. There we go. But not a string. We just want regular true. Perfect. We save that. This is what the scheduler looks like on the mobile device. So as you can see, the top header stay fixed as I scroll around here. I can show business hours. Go ahead and click that. There we go. And that will toggle over to the business hours. Let me go ahead and change my location here. And there we go. And there's all of our data just as it was before. Now the scheduler is extending a bit off the screen, and frankly, the top bar is taking up too much space in conjunction with the header. This scheduler is nearly halfway down the mobile device by the time it gets displayed. We can't have that. What we're going to do is add in a little bit of off canvas. Now this is something we wrote about just recently, and you can use this in conjunction with your responsive projects. That's the great thing about responsive web development. A couple CSS classes and a little JavaScript go a long way. So you can see I have this button over here to the left. What I'd like to do is move that drop-down list over so the scheduler can expand to the width of the whole window, and when the button is clicked, we can slide the whole app over and get to the drop-down list. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to apply a little bit of CSS here, not too much. And of course, you can check the blogs for how to do this. So let me go ahead and save this and refresh. And now the scheduler occupies the whole screen when it's refreshed and the drop-down list is gone. If I click this button, the whole application will slide over and the drop-down list is revealed. And we can select the new location, scooch back over, and here's all of our data. Now, of course, we've optimized this scheduler for touch. So I can actually click on one of these items here, and you'll see we get these white drag handles, and we can actually use touch to resize these events. Additionally, if I click on it to tap, we get a dedicated window, just like with the grid. We get an action sheet for delete, just like with the grid. And we're using native pickers because we're using input types that these mobile devices recognize. We can also create a new event here in our scheduler by double tapping. There we go. All right, I'm going to put a new person on the schedule. I'm going to put somebody in the kitchen, and we're going to have this poor soul come in at 5 o'clock in the morning, and we'll make that Courtney. I say Doria. Sorry, Doria. So Doria's going to come in at 5 o'clock in the morning. Let's go ahead and give this a title, and we'll save it. Perfect. And you can see that Doria is now on the schedule. Now I may want to move Doria around. I could do that one of two ways. I could go back to the edit screen, or I could simply touch this element with my finger, resize it, move it over, and drop it. And you'll notice that when I do, it even changes color because the scheduler has updated not only the back end, but the client side as well to give you that UI feedback that you have actually moved something. It's now in a new section. It's now in the dining room, so it gets a new color. These are the fantastic new features in the grid and the scheduler, all making responsive web design with these elaborate widgets completely possible via adaptive rendering. With that, I'm going to hand it off to Derek to talk to you about some more amazing new features, and he's also going to ask you to welcome in your new overlord. I really can't explain it any better than that, so you're just going to have to see what I'm talking about. Let me turn it over to him. Derek?
All right, thanks, Burke, and hi, everyone. Hope everybody out there is enjoying the show so far. I know there's a lot of great stuff that you're seeing, and hopefully I'll be showing you some more amazing things here in a moment or two. So I wanted to show you guys a couple of different things today, including another new feature that we have inside of the DataViz suite. And I know TJ already talked about the DataViz suite quite a bit and did an amazing job showing some of those new controls. But we've got another one in here that's pretty darn sweet, and I'm really happy to be showing you guys the new DataViz maps that we have. So like any other maps that you see out there, Google Maps or Yahoo Maps or whatever else, we do have a basic tile-based system. So as you start scrolling, you'll see that this is actually loading more information from out there on the web. It's kind of moving pretty quickly at this point because I have a pretty good internet connection, but you'll see it flashing a little bit at a time. We do also have some controls over here built into this map, so you can pan around the place and you can recenter back to where you originally started. So it's a pretty slick little map setup, and I'm going to go ahead and show you some of the code that we actually use for this. So you can see here that I have this Kendo map called on this map element inside of my HTML. Now this is just a standard div, and it's the Kendo map control call that's actually drawing the entire thing on the screen. So some of the options that you'll see in the map are the latitude and longitude here as the center, and this tells the map where to center itself when it is drawn, but it also tells the map where to recenter when you click that center button in the controls. We also have a zoom and some layers. So the zoom is how much detail you're going to see, how far in or out in this map you're going to see. A lower zoom is going to be zoomed out farther, and a higher zoom is going to be zoomed in farther. So if I change this to a 14, for example, come back over here, reload the page, you'll see that it zoomed in quite a bit, all the way down to street level and highway level on top of Albuquerque, New Mexico in this case. So you'll also see that there in this layers, I do have one particular layer set up here that's integrating with OpenStreetMap.org. Now OpenStreetMap is pretty much what it sounds like. It's a street map that is open for basically anyone to use. It gives us a lot of detail about the different streets, the highways, and everything around the world. And it's pretty simple to integrate it into the Kendo UI maps. All I had to do was provide a URL template that points to the OpenStreetMap site, and then tell it what zoom and what X and Y coordinates, latitude and longitude, are actually being used in the setup. So the last thing that we have on this particular demo is the markers. Of course, what good would a map be without markers? I'm going to go ahead and reset this zoom back to 4, head back over to the page, and I'm going to click on this show markers that I have set up, and you'll see that we do have map markers located on the screen. So you'll be able to get a lot of different markers in here. It's pretty simple to add them. You just add a latitude and longitude coordinates, and you can add different markers all around the world. In this case, I have a couple of markers over here pointing to some of the Telerik offices. So the marker setup is fairly simple, like I said. It's just a collection of latitude and longitude as a location, and then also a tooltip that we can specify for when we click on one of these markers. So if I click on this one, for example, we see Copenhagen, Denmark, along with the latitude and longitude listed right here. If I click on the one in London, click on the one over here in Munich, you get the idea, right? All of this comes from the tooltip where I'm specifying the information and then the location that I'm specifying with the latitude and longitude, and then passing that array of markers into the markers setting on the Kendo map call. Alright, so you can already see some pretty cool features in this map, but there's more. I also have the ability to add my own custom controls so I can do some interesting things to manipulate this map. In this case, I have a latitude and longitude slider, and I also have a zoom in, zoom out control. So I can drag this slider here, and we can see that I'm scrolling through the map as if I were using the map controls on the map itself, only in this case, it's a custom control that I've got set up. But I've also got these zoom in and zoom out features. So I can click on the magnifying glass to zoom in. I can scroll over here a little ways, zoom in a little bit farther, get more detailed information all the way down again into the street level detail of individual cities. And as you can see, when I start zooming out, the map actually loads up a little bit faster than it did previously because my browser is actually caching these tiles that it had loaded. So when I'm zooming in and zooming out, the more I do it, the faster it seems to be getting. I've also got these controls basically synced up, as you saw. When I start dragging this around, I can zoom in, and then I can still drag from where I was. I'm not having to reset where I was. So I've got all the controls in sync between the map itself and my custom controls. So let's take a look at how I did that real quick. And so here I've got things set up in a Kendo observable MVVM setup. I have the latitude and longitude and the zoom set as properties, observable properties inside of this MVVM model. And I have a create map function here. And in the create map function, I'm pulling out the zoom and both the latitude and longitude, and then using that information to call the Kendo map function. In addition to those settings, I also have this pan end function set up. And this pan end event is going to be fired every time I use the mouse or the map controls to move the current location of the map. So when the pan end event gets called, I end up calling this map.setCenter function. And the setCenter function calls back to the map model to set the latitude and longitude. Now I have this setCenter function because I'm also using my latitude slider and my longitude slider to call setCenter. So as you can see, after every time I change anything on the map, whether it's panning with the map controls or with the latitude and longitude sliders, I'm calling setCenter, and then I'm rebuilding the map, and that gives me the effect of having everything in sync. So I can move the map around here, I can move the map around here, I can zoom in and zoom out, and as I'm moving and zooming, everything is staying in sync. So this is all pretty slick, right? But yet there are still more features of this map control. If I come over here to the other maps demo, we can see that I have a slightly different map. Now again, this one is just a tile basically right now, but it's pulling from a different map source, so it's giving me more of a topographical map in this case. But one of the really cool things is that we can turn on and off these different layers and show different things at different times. And one of the layers that I have set up here is this idea of GeoJSON. Now, GeoJSON is the idea of creating a map coordinate system, including the drawings and the actual objects on the map, out of a JSON document. So if I turn this on, you can see this beautiful little rainbow colored map overlaid on top of the existing map that I had. Of course, I can turn off the other map, and we just see the GeoJSON map in this case. Now, one of the things I've done with the GeoJSON is provide different color sets. So I can come over here to my little drop-down list and change the colors that are being drawn with the GeoJSON to a couple of different things that I have set up here. And if I put the map back on, of course, you see the transparency on top of the existing map when I draw the GeoJSON with these various colors. All right, so let's take a look at how this one was set up. And what I have here in this maps GeoJSON file is again a standard map layer pointing to the open cycle map in this case to get that topographical map, but I also have this JSON shape layer, and the GeoJSON shape layer gives us the ability to say, hey, I've got a GeoJSON map, and here's the actual GeoJSON file that I'm going to pull from. So I'm going to load up this file, this countryusers.geojson file, and as you can see, it is pretty much just a standard JSON file. I've got a bunch of JavaScript looking key value pairs like a JSON document has. But then I have these geometries in here along with all of these different other configuration bits for the individual GeoJSON objects. Now, in order to get the colors into this map, I'm not actually interpreting the colors from the code. I'm using settings inside of this GeoJSON. In this case, it's the properties, where I have both the name and a user's count in this properties object here. So what I've done basically is I've taken an existing GeoJSON map that already had this information populated, and I'm just using this user information to generate the actual colors. So I'm doing that by using another plugin called Chroma.js, which is giving me the ability to create scales of colors, and then I can use those scales of colors to say I want this many steps in between all of the different colors. And once I have that, I'm using this onShape created event that comes from the map. So when I look at the Kendo map, I can see that I have this shape created event handler right here, which is calling the onShape created method. And the onShape created method is grabbing the current shape that is being drawn, or the shape that was just drawn, and it's getting the information out of the properties right here. So in this case, the user's count. And then I'm using that chroma scale in order to get the value out of the current chroma scale that I have selected from that drop-down list. Once I have that, I'm getting the actual shape and filling it with that particular color. Now each of these colors is being drawn with a slight transparency to it, which gives us all of that beautiful overlay on top of the existing topographical map. And then once I've got that set up and running, I'm just selecting a different value of colors, the different chroma scales, by using this drop-down list up here. So you can turn these on and off. You can show the individual parts, and then you can select the different colors out of this particular map. So this GeoJSON stuff is pretty slick, right? But what are some of the cool things that you might want to do with it? Well, I've got another demo here that shows you some of the things that you could do with GeoJSON if you really wanted to. Now, I'm not saying that you should go around drawing kitties with GeoJSON and putting those into your maps, but just as a demonstration of what you can do with GeoJSON and our new map control, I think it's pretty slick. It's pretty funny anyways. So I'm doing the same basic thing here where I'm using a GeoJSON objects and I'm adding properties to the different objects to set the colors. So let's take a look at this map now, this overlord.geojson, and you can see that I've got a geometry here and I've got properties here, but in this case I named the property orange, and I'm just using this property as the actual color to populate into the given map. So if I load up the map's overlord here, again I'm using the onShape created and I'm grabbing the color property and I'm just calling shape.fill and passing in the color. So I could do things like, setting this to blue the entire time, completely ignoring the color that I have in there, and the whole thing would be drawn as blue. I don't really want to do that though, that's kind of ugly. I like having all of these individual colors on my cat. And so there we have the meow, the overlord kitty drawn on top of our map. I, for one, welcome my new overlords, but you can go and draw whatever you want on top of your GeoJSON. Alright, so there's one more thing that I want to show you guys today, and I promise it's not more maps or kitties this time. It's actually something that you've been seeing during the entire set of demonstrations from both Burke and TJ and myself, but you may not have realized it. And that is our new integration, our new theme that sits on top of Bootstrap 3. Now, Bootstrap 3 is a really popular framework for building web apps these days. It gives us a beautiful grid structure, a beautiful way to lay out pages, a lot of built-in controls, and a really nice theme that it comes with out of the box. And Kendo UI is very proud to announce that we are fully supporting Bootstrap 3 with a brand new theme, that gives us some amazing integration in terms of the colors and also the dimensions of the controls that we have. So in modern web apps, you see a big trend these days moving toward larger controls, more space, more white space around the controls and the text, and just having everything a little bit bigger and a little bit easier to read and understand. And our new Bootstrap 3 theme fits right in with Bootstrap 3 and makes it look really, really good. So as you can see, I've got some charts here that are being drawn with the Kendo UI data viz, and I've got some grids that are being set up here with a layout for this individual page. I've got a lot of different controls here. I've got some of the Bootstrap custom stuff going on here. I've got some of the Kendo UI controls going on in here, and we've got this really nice looking setup that makes everything look good together out of the box. You're not going to have to spend a lot of time customizing your control suite theme anymore in order to make Bootstrap and Kendo UI look good together. And in addition to the new theme, I also have this page set up using the Bootstrap 3 grid, and it's fully resizable and responsive to the different sizes. So you can see as I'm dragging this thing a little bit smaller, we get more of a tablet size layout where we have a single column. Everything is starting to get a little more compact, but everything is still looking good. And I can continue to drag this down even further until we get to the point where the Bootstrap menu kicks in and we have a single column that's even smaller, showing smaller and smaller screen real estate, but still keeping everything on the screen very nicely. We can get it all the way down to a ridiculously small size, which would be more like a mobile phone in this case, and have everything still showing up as expected. So it's a pretty slick layout in terms of getting Bootstrap 3 integrated and getting the theme in place, and it all looks really good together. And as I said before, this entire demo app with all of Burke's demos and TJ's demos and my demos has all been set up using this Bootstrap 3 configuration with our new theme and the Bootstrap 3 layouts, of course. So that's pretty much it. That's all I had to show you guys today. The new map controls that we have in place for Kendo UI Data Viz and the new Bootstrap 3 integration that we have with our Bootstrap 3 theme. And with that, I'll send it back over to Todd.
You've seen some pretty amazing demos today, and so I think now it's just time to wrap it up with a few details. All the new value, all the new things you've seen that are now part of Kendo UI remain available separately via Kendo UI Web, DataViz, or mobile, or together in Kendo UI Complete. Best value, get everything you're seeing here today, along with unlimited support. And if you are working with a server-side technology, the server wrappers for MVC, ASP.NET MVC, JSP, and PHP are available. And if you're an active subscription holder, then everything that you've seen today is already waiting for you in your account. And because we want everybody to be a winner, there is a special Keynote promo exclusive to those of you attending today. You'll get it in your follow-up emails that will give you 25% off new Kendo UI purchases. We hope you'll use that and get the most out of Kendo UI. And as I mentioned up front, the raffle winners from today's online keynote will be notified. We'll email you if you win. We'll tweet out the winners very soon, and we'll blog about them tomorrow. So watch our official Kendo UI Twitter account at Kendo UI if you want to be among the first to know who wins some of the great prizes we were giving out today. And with that, there's really only one more thing for you to do, as we always like to ask you to do. Go to KendoUI.com right now. As soon as you're done with today's online keynote, download the latest Kendo UI bits, tell your friends about them, try them out, check out the new demos. We think you're going to love what you see. Send us your feedback. And we thank you once again for coming and spending an hour with us today to see what we're really excited about and what we're shipping in this latest Kendo UI release. And with that, we're now going to transition to a live extended Q&A where we're going to take as many of your questions as we can and answer them here. So there's going to be a little blip as we make that transition, and I'll invite our Q&A host to the stage to help deal with the questions. If you have to drop off, thank you once again for joining us today for this keynote, and we hope to see you online again very soon after the holidays. Enjoy your holidays for another Telerik Kendo UI online keynote.